Hello citizens! In this video I would like to shed some light on why features and the roadmap are so unpredictable and whether CIG is just bad at planning. I actually briefly touched on this topic during my appearance on the captain's table, and this video is a more in-depth explanation of what I said. As always, before we begin, if you liked the video, sacrifice a like to the YouTube algorithm and subscribe for more. So, to answer the original question, is CIG bad at planning? Not really. And here's why. I'm coming at this from my job as a software developer, and I'm guessing that planning in game development is very similar or same as planning in commercial software development. So before we get into the actual issue, I think I should explain how modern software development is managed in most cases. I think it's fair to assume that CIG operate on some type of an agile development model. For those of you who are not familiar with Agile, I have linked some sources in the description or the pinned comment. But the short explanation is that Agile methods are focused on making software development flexible, adaptable, and somewhat rapid as well. They achieve this using development iterations commonly called sprints, and are heavily focused on communication and integrating feedback from the client quickly. So let's move on to a basic example and then scale it up. To track features, bugs, or other deliverables, developers use various software like Jira, Azure DevOps, or Trello. To track a single deliverable, we use something that's commonly called an issue. An issue usually contains the description of what needs to be done, how it should be tested, what is the deadline if there is any, its business value, and for features, most importantly, its estimation. The estimation of an issue in simplest possible terms is a numerical representation of how much effort the issue will take to complete. The actual value is completely dependent on the team, but generally speaking, a higher estimate means more difficulty. So let's start with the example. We have one team with several issues in their backlog. It's the start of their next sprint. At the start of every sprint, there usually is a planning meeting where the team decides what issues they're going to work on during the sprint. In this case, we have a single team working within the company on a single product. So what they decide to work on is completely dependent on their client's priorities and the team's capacity. Now, we all know development never goes smoothly. So usually you end up finding bugs to solve, and often these arise during the sprint, and sometimes they're severe enough that you need to give them priority over what was originally planned, which might cause delays on the originally planned issues. And this creates the first problem during planning. Your goal is to maximize the number of deliverables delivered during each sprint, which in a lot of cases doesn't leave a lot of room to deal with incoming critical bugs. I don't think CIG receive a lot of bugs during their development iterations, but they usually get a huge influx after every release. And since CIG seem to be planning for long periods, this can cause delays or otherwise affect the release schedule. Now, let's move on to a scenario that's closer to reality. We have multiple teams within the same company working largely towards one product which comprises of many assets and services. This is the case for most, if not all, large companies. In this scenario, you're going to find yourself in a situation where your team's issue is depending on an issue that's being done by another team. And at this point, you're completely at the mercy of their planning. If there isn't enough communication between the two teams about properly synchronizing each other's priorities, it can cause delays within the team and for the product. And this is the second and possibly the biggest problem CIG are facing. They're working on a massive product with many teams working at once. A lot of their deliverables have 2 or more teams working on them, and this amplifies the problem even further. Also, having longer sprints makes this issue a lot worse, and planning ahead of time makes it worse as well. I believe CIG use month-long sprints for most of their teams, and they like to do long-term planning once or twice a year. Now, let's move on to the final hidden problem. Remember how issues have estimates? Well, sometimes it is difficult to correctly estimate an issue. So you may end up with an issue that is estimated fairly low at 2 points, for example. But once you start working on it, you realize that the issue is much more complex than originally expected, and suddenly the value jumps to 8. Now, this shouldn't happen very often, but it still does, and it may cause the issue to be moved or other issues to be delayed, which will of course cause all teams that depend on the original issue to be delayed as well. Now, CIG are building something new, and they're often moving through uncharted waters, so I wouldn't be surprised if such jumps in complexity were common in their development. all three problems that I mentioned today are common in all software development, so we can't really blame CIG for being late or bad at planning. However, it is important for the development team and the company to communicate these problems to the client. And unfortunately, CIG has a lot to improve in this regard. Though the new progress tracker is certainly a step in the right direction, I would also welcome more detailed or more frequent progress updates and more detailed explanations for things being moved off the roadmap. With that being said, that's it for tonight. If you liked the video, leave a like and subscribe for more. Fly safe, go agile, and I will see you in the verse.